You are standing in front of a mirror right now, or you will be soon, and without thinking about it, you will pick something to wear, a shirt, trousers, shoes. You will do this because you have done it every single day of your life. But here is what no one ever told you. The reason you do this has almost nothing to do with modesty, and it has almost nothing to do with the cold. The real reason humans started wearing clothes is far stranger than you think. And once you understand it, you will never look at a piece of fabric the same way again. Go back, way back. Around 170,000 years ago, your ancestors lived on the southern tip of Africa during one of the most brutal climate events in human history. A glacial period had gripped the planet. Temperatures had dropped. Food was scarce. The human population had shrunk to somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 individuals. Some researchers believe it may have been even fewer. The entire human species was balanced on the edge of extinction, and they had no clothes. Not a single thread, not a single animal hide stitched together. Nothing. Your direct ancestors, the ones whose DNA runs through your body right now, were surviving some of the harshest conditions the planet had ever produced, completely bare. So what changed? Geneticist Mark Stoneking at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology asked a question that sounds almost absurd. He decided to study lice. Specifically, he studied the difference between head lice and body lice. Head lice live in hair. Body lice live in clothing. They need fabric to survive, to lay eggs, to reproduce. And here is the thing about body lice. They evolved from head lice, which means body lice could not have existed before clothing existed. So Stoneking and his team traced the genetic divergence between the two species. They calculated roughly when body lice first split from head lice, and the answer they got was somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. That is when clothing began, not because of fashion, not because of shame, because of survival. But survival from what? This is where it gets complicated, because the earliest clothing was not invented in the coldest part of the world. It was invented in Africa, and Africa, even during a glacial period, was not the tundra of Europe or Siberia. So the cold theory alone doesn't hold. Anthropologist Ian Gilligan at the University of Sydney spent years rethinking the entire clothing origin story, and what he found challenges almost everything you were taught. He argues that the first clothing was not about warmth in the way we assume. It was about managing heat loss at night, in the wind, in rain. Even in a relatively mild climate, a naked human body loses heat fast when the temperature drops after dark or when a cold wind rolls in off the ocean. Clothing was not about surviving a blizzard, it was about surviving the night. Think about that for a moment. The first piece of clothing ever worn was probably not a fur coat. It was probably more like a wrapped hide or a bundle of leaves, something to stop the wind. Something to hold in body heat just long enough to make it to morning. Something that cost your ancestor almost nothing to grab, but saved their life while they slept. And yet something strange happened along the way. Clothing did not stay practical for long, because roughly 100,000 years ago, something shifts in the archaeological record. You start seeing evidence of ochre, red pigment ground into powder and used to decorate surfaces. You start seeing shell beads, pierced and strung together. You start seeing the early traces of what researchers call symbolic behavior. The human brain had crossed a threshold. It was no longer just solving physical problems. It was solving social ones, and clothing became one of the most powerful social tools your ancestors ever invented. Psychologist Adam Galinsky at Columbia Business School has spent years studying what he calls enclothed cognition, the idea that what you wear does not just signal who you are to others, it actually changes how you think. In one famous study, Participants who wore a lab coat described as a doctor's coat performed significantly better on attention tasks than those who wore the same coat described as a painter's coat. The coat was identical. The difference was the meaning attached to it, and your brain responded to that meaning, not to the fabric. Your ancestors figured this out tens of thousands of years before science could explain it. Because once clothing became symbolic, it became everything. It became rank. It became tribe. It became a signal that told strangers whether you were a threat or an ally, whether you were powerful or weak, whether you belonged here or somewhere else. A decorated hide meant something. The feathers in your hair meant something. The color painted onto your body meant something. And in a world where your survival depended entirely on your social relationships, on who trusted you and who protected you and who shared food with you, those signals were not decoration. They were survival tools of a different kind. And here is the part that most people never stop to consider. Shame had nothing to do with it. The idea that humans started wearing clothes because they were ashamed of their bodies is a story that was layered on top of the real history thousands of years later. It comes from a specific cultural and religious moment in time, but the archaeological and genetic evidence tells a completely different story. Clothing came first. The shame narrative came much, much later. Your body did not need to be hidden. It needed to be warm, and then it needed to be read. Because that is what clothing really is. It is a language, and your brain is reading it constantly, whether you are aware of it or not. Neuroscientist Pascal Molenbergs at Monash University has studied how quickly the human brain classifies other people based on visual signals. The answer is measured in milliseconds. Before you have consciously processed what you are looking at, your brain has already begun making judgments about social status, group membership, and threat level based on appearance. And clothing is one of the loudest signals in that visual stream. You cannot turn this off. It is not a bias you developed. It is a system your brain inherited from ancestors who needed to know in an instant whether the approaching figure was friend or enemy. Which means every morning when you stand in front of your wardrobe trying to decide what to wear, you are not just picking fabric. You are picking your signal. You are choosing what your body will say before you open your mouth. You are participating in a communication system that is older than writing, older than agriculture, older than cities. A system that began with a wrapped hide on a cold African night, held against the skin of someone who just needed to survive until morning. And now you wear it to an interview, to a first date, to a funeral, to a protest, to a stage. The clothes have changed, the system has not. So tonight, when you lay out what you are going to wear tomorrow, pause for just a second, because you are not choosing an outfit. You are sending a signal. And somewhere deep in the evolved architecture of your brain, so is everyone else around you, just like they always have, just like that first ancestor did, wrapping a hide around their shoulders in the dark, not knowing they were starting something that would never stop. You have been doing this your whole life, but now you know why.